Welcome back to the Wine and Dime Pod, the podcast where we drink wine and talk hoops. I'm Chris and that's Lyndsay. And we're here with you on Super Bowl Sunday. I'm doing this recording right now. It'll drop on Tuesday, but pretend the Super Bowl was great and everyone had a wonderful time.
Yeah, green hair, lifelong Birds fan since today. Go Birds. I'm excited to see how Eagles fans are going to destroy New Orleans one way or another. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, hope for positive destruction, I guess, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
Destroying themselves more so than the city.
I saw a TikTok of Bradley Cooper. He's got a food truck in New Orleans right now, and he's been serving up cheesesteaks to Philly fans. Loyal.
I respect it. I respect it. But there's good sandwiches in that city already. He didn't really have to do all
I
that.
know. I'm like, you don't need a
Could be eating
cheesesteak when you can
mufaletas
just
and stuff.
go eat a po' boy. Who needs it? Who
Hmm.
needs cheesesteak when you could have a
Hmm.
shrimp po' boy? I've never even been to New
The
Orleans.
Gator ones? Oof.
I want to try it so bad. I know. So my mom is celiac, and her like biggest like not regret, but just like the thing she laments the most about her time in New Orleans was like she never got to try gator because they only ever deep fry it and she can't have
Yeah,
the
I don't think
batter.
you would want it in steak form. I don't think that would be
No, no. Well, I
yeah,
think
it
she
wouldn't
was
be
just
that great.
hoping that maybe there was like a batter that wasn't like flour based, maybe that she could try, but there wasn't. And nobody really knew what celiac disease was in New Orleans, so that was a challenge
Fair
for
enough.
her.
Yeah, I don't think beignets are celiac friendly either, to be
No,
completely
no.
honest.
Most Southern food kind of isn't.
Not so
It's
much.
a bit of a struggle for
You
her.
know,
Although
they
it
don't
has
got the
gotten
gluten-free hush puppies.
No, it's gotten better though because I mean, to be fair, like they went a long time ago too when celiac disease was still kind of like people here barely even knew what it was. So I think it's probably gotten better in certain places. Like, and when obviously the more higher end restaurant you eat at, that like they ate at some really like they won a trip there for Jazz Fest and they got to go to like Preservation Hall. So they got to eat like at some nice restaurants too, and that was easier because obviously you have real chefs who understand how food is cooked. So not just and it's easier to make adjustments to the menu at that point. But yeah. Anyways, I wish I was eating a po' boy right now, but here we are
It's too bad.
celebrating.
They ain't got it in Alberta. But yeah,
There are actually there's places that serve them here, but it's not
I
like the
don't
same.
trust it. I don't trust it.
Yeah, there is actually a restaurant in Edmonton apparently that's like
They
a
they
New
sell middle
Orleans.
class boys up there. It's not the same.
It's like a New Orleans style like restaurant. So they've got like they actually do serve gator up there apparently. And I'm like interesting. I'm
Get
sure
down
the
respect.
import I'm sure the import costs on gator is high.
Especially now.
That will be subject to tariffs. So
Canadian gator
yeah,
market is about to collapse. I'm sorry.
yeah, there's a distinct lack of gator in Canada. It's too cold for them here. But we are celebrating actually the 1 year anniversary of podcasting together between our former podcast and now this one. So look at us go.
Hey, there you go.
And we're celebrating with kind of a unique, fun little wine today. We got the Casillero del Diablo from Chile, a little Carmenere. So this is a fun grape that I've honestly never tried too much of, so this will be fun. But
So shit.
it's yeah, so it's a grape that's kind of like it's not native to Chile. It is a French grape, but it's a very interesting one because for a very long time it's actually considered one of the six original grapes of Bordeaux, but it died off for a long time in Europe, and so for a very long time people thought that Carmenere was a extinct grape. But then in the 70s, there was a scientist who was roaming around. Its regions are in the Medoc region of Bordeaux, and it was struck with this disease, and essentially, yeah, it all died. And so basically, they thought that Carmenere was kind of dead. And then in Chile, this scientist was roaming around, and he decided to do some genetic testing on a lot of vineyards that they thought were Merlot grapes, and it turned out that they were Carmenere. And so Chile is now basically the largest growing region for Carmenere. It's related to Cab Sav and Merlot. Again, it's a Bordeaux grape, so same idea. We're going to get lots of tannin. It's going to be super dry. Good for oak aging, some good acidity. It's usually blended with Cab and Merlot because it's a really strong and bold grape, which is kind of part of why we chose it for today, because boy, there were some bold-ass moves in the trade deadline and WNBA free agency, so it felt right to do something a little big and bold and spicy.
Trade
So
deadline also back from the dead. There's a couple of quiet ones for a few years, and it's going again. Every team is trying to do the most complex cap fucking accounting possible right now. They're trying to do backflips to get out of the second apron to the extent of trading superstar players or young players with potential, trying to get cheaper guys on the deal. It's been interesting to watch. Free agency is pretty much not an exciting thing anymore, but the trade season
yeah.
is getting interesting. There's some players who I did not think were going to move. Obviously, besides Luca, which we talked about last episode, there were other players who moved who I just did not see getting bounced out their homes all of a sudden. There's a lot of activity.
Sorry, I'm dealing with how dry this. Wow, this is intense. It just kind of hit me. There's a lot of tannin in this bad boy.
Should probably start from the top though. The one move that we kind of all thought was going to happen wound up happening. De'Aaron Fox had talked about kind of wanting out of Sacramento. It kind of felt like they were stuck in perpetual ninth to 12th seed space. It didn't really feel like that they capitalized on that moment. The Beam team from a couple of years ago, they never really grew on that. I think they wanted to be somewhere a little bit more competitive. And the Spurs, I think, wanted to get, okay, we need to pair somebody with Wembanyama who can
Mm-hmm.
really accelerate the development of that team. Getting Chris Paul in there and getting, Harrison Barnes and guys like that helped sort of stabilize them and make them competitive. But they
They
needed
need that
somebody who could
next.
actually take them to give them like a real number two guy next to Wemby. And Darren Fox is that's a really nice complimentary piece.
I
Maybe not the
agree.
best outside shooter, but the good news is your big can shoot. So you can have a guard that isn't an outside shooter when your big can shoot from 25 feet.
And yeah, so this was we suffered the podcaster's curse because we did an emergency episode making us a weekly podcast. And then literally hours after we finished recording. Fuck. We even talked about how we knew this was going to happen. There was too much smoke for there not to be fire, and then it happened. Yeah, it's really interesting because I think that the fact that they didn't have to give up Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson. I mean, Keldon Johnson, like it's unsure. I'm unsure kind of what his future role is, but he's a nice, decent reserve player. Like he's a solid enough player that you don't want to lose someone like him necessarily. He fits pretty well on that team, but like not having to give up Devin Vassell was pretty big because he fits really well too with a player like De'Aaron Fox and in that Wemby kind of combination because he's a good outside shooter too. He gives you a lot of spacing and so lots of juice, and he can handle the ball. He's just not a point guard. He's a score first kind of guard, so he's kind of perfect to put next to Fox and Wemby. And then Stephon Castle is obviously growing into defensive monster, which is really helpful because De'Aaron Fox is not known for his defense either. Which again, having a player like Wemby covers up a lot, but it does help when you can have a good perimeter dog out there with your big. So I love the trade. Honestly, the Spurs got away with highway robbery again because they really didn't give up a lot. They gave up
Yeah,
like the
just
least
picks, just picks.
and like the least favorable of their picks. I think they technically gave up 3 picks, and then it was like a bunch of seconds if the one
One was
first doesn't
protected
convey.
1 through 14. One was
Yeah,
their own pick in 2027, and they'll be good then. And
yeah.
then a 20 to 2031 Minnesota pick could be good, but it we don't know. Minnesota might be able to stay competitive for
I
that
thought
long.
they
They do
gave up
have
another. I think one of their picks too. If it doesn't convey as a first, like it turns into a bunch of seconds or something. I can't remember if it was that trade or a different one, but yeah, they didn't
maybe a
really give up a
Charlotte pick,
lot.
maybe.
Yeah, I think maybe the Charlotte pick. There's something that conveys into if it doesn't convey, it turns into a bunch of seconds. It's I don't know, confusing, but regardless, they didn't really give up that. On the face of it, I think they gave up 4 picks, but realistically, it was 3 first round picks in a couple seconds. It wasn't a lot, and they weren't great picks anyways. It's not like they were super high. Like they're yeah, like you said, they're all lottery protected or like the chances of them being bad enough to be a top 5 pick are pretty. The Minnesota one's the only one where it's like maybe because it's Minnesota and you're just sort of banking on that franchise being the Timberwolves. But Anthony Edwards is really good, so at the end of the day, like it's probably not going to be that great. So
Yeah, let's say Luca his ass.
The Spurs they made off like bandits. Once again, Sacramento got the worst out of or wait, Chicago got kind of the worst deal. The Bulls have not done well this trade deadline. Like they got off the players they needed to get off of, but once again they get screwed in a 3-team trade. They don't get like the best player or the best picks. It's kind of funny.
The Bulls haven't done well this decade, to be
Yeah,
honest.
it's
But
tough.
they haven't. They've just kind of been like spinning the wheels. You know what I mean? Not really doing a whole lot. It's weird. The Kings got Zach LaVine now, so we got the DeRozan LaVine combo reunited again. We're going to
The
see some
Kings
of the most heavily contested jump shots that we've ever seen on that Kings team right now. It's going to be some buckets. There's going to be some hooping ass hooping going on over there.
the Kings really looked at the Kings really looked at the DeMar DeRozan Zach LaVine pairing of the Bulls and were like, yeah, I want that.
Yeah,
Give me
there's
that
going to be
now.
some fadeaways with some incredible elevation and picturesque form. It's gonna be aesthetically pleasing if you're like a 90s ISO ball fan. It's gonna look really cool, but
I have a little
it
bit
might
more.
not be that successful.
Yeah, I have a bit more faith in Zach LaVine getting to play with a really talented big like Domas though, which I guess the other move they made too. They brought in Jonas Valanciunas to shore up their center role, which I think is a solid move. They have the Lithuanian Players of the Year for the last the last I don't know decade because it was Jonas for a long time. Now it's been Domas, so like they've got both now. Team Lithuania in the middle. I'm sure Arvydas is very proud. But
I don't know if they can share the court, to be honest. So it might just be
no,
Jonas
they
might just be
could.
out there for 15 minutes a night
But
when Domas is resting. But
he seems like he's been fine with coming off the bench. Like he came off the bench a lot in New Orleans near the end, and I think he's really good to stabilize that second unit and also ensures Domas probably doesn't have to play like 10,000 minutes a game. And he
because he
can
played hurt a lot
replicate.
last couple of years.
Yeah, so I
Played in
think
the
that
playoffs with
it's
that wrist injury against the Warriors that one season.
yeah, he played the whole season almost with that injury, and like it was
Yeah,
broken. Like he basically had a broken thumb, and he played the whole season because it was like he
yeah,
injured it pretty early in the season. So
yeah.
he's a tough dude, and so is Jonas. But I think that it's just a nice shores up that big position for them, which I think you're going to really need when you have guards like Levine and DeRozan. You need people who can set good screens and shit. I think, and Zach Levine talked even about how different it is playing with a big like Domas because Domas has just more gravity and he's a better passer than Vooch. Not that he was trying to throw shade at Vooch; they are different players, but Domas has a bit more like he sets way harder screens. He kind of lingers on the screen more. He's more physical than Vooch, so it just creates a bit more space. And Domas is a much better passer, so it keeps it moving a bit more. And Levine is at least a good 3 point shooter, so that adds some spacing. But yeah,
I
it's
I
kind
think
of
if you're the Kings, the big
interesting.
move is going to be you have to bring out the tie dye, like the Lithuanian '92 team. You got to break out the tie dye. You got to bring out the Grateful Dead vibes. Got to
Yep,
do it.
I agree. They definitely need to, but yeah, I don't know. I'm interested in seeing what Jonas does, and they didn't really give up a lot to get him. They only gave up CD Sissoko, a 28 second rounder and a 29 second rounder. So like, and they got Sissoko from Chicago in the Zach Levine trade. So like, they really didn't give up a lot to get him. So I think that's solid. Other West team, there's been some interesting moves. Really briefly, the Thunder went out and got another center because they've had a problem with depth at that position. So they went out and got Daniel Tice, which decent move. They didn't give up a lot. They gave up cash.
Cash. Yeah, just whatever they had lying around. They said, "Hey man, we'll take Daniel Tice."
The Thunder just shook out the couch cushions and were like, "Cool, give me the German."
Yeah, I think the Pelicans know that ain't a lot shaking out there right now. They're just like, "Hey, would you like this large man? Like, we're not going nowhere this near
Yeah,
anywhere."
yeah. Other West. Oh, Jimmy Butler Saga is finally over. I guess we should spend some time on that. That's a pretty big one. We're not really going in any chronological order here, obviously. But yeah, the Jimmy Butler Saga is finally over, and he is in Golden State.
I'm sure that his Heat teammates are I mean, I'm sure they like him or whatever, right? But I'm sure they're also glad that they don't have to fucking deal with the weird passive aggressive shit in the media every couple weeks and the not knowing if he's gonna even like show up to practice or on a flight and all that. Like, it was weird seeing video of a fan breaking the trade news to Heat players on the bench. Like, what an era we live in. That's like
I
the thing that
know.
people don't think about is like in this era where you hear players talk about, oh, I found out that I got traded on Twitter. Well, if it happens during the game, they're not checking their phones. Somebody 2 rows behind them is about to find out before they do, and they can actually tell them in real time, which is
I mean,
crazy.
that's what happened during the Luca trade too in Phoenix.
Yeah,
Remember? Yeah, it's
yeah.
crazy. So Brian Windhorst from ESPN did a really good. He had a really good article on the whole trade because in this whole situation, excuse me, the Phoenix Suns managed to alienate KD and Bradley Beal, trying to get Jimmy Butler. And Matt Ishbia is really pushing hard for worst NBA owner and their like most questionable decisions made per minute. And it was really interesting. So basically, like the Phoenix Suns were trying to get Butler, and originally they obviously wanted to pair Butler with Booker and KD, but Bradley Beal has a no trade clause, which is tough. And
Does the
so
Heat even want Bradley Beal though? Is the question.
The Heat didn't, and that's the
Why
thing.
would they?
Is yeah,
Yeah.
right. I mean, and so nobody wants him.
The no trade clause is almost just like secondary to the fact that nobody wants to trade for him.
I mean, the no trade clause does make it harder though too, because like you'd be more willing to take him on in like a salary dump if there was a no like
Yeah.
there wasn't that no trade clause because you could at least flip him later or like
Send him to
whatever.
Charlotte, you know what I
Right?
mean?
It's
Like
easier, like
exile him to basketball
yeah,
Siberia. Yeah.
yeah, which is Charlotte, North Carolina.
Unfortunately, it's a decent city.
Yeah.
But basketball wise, it is, I'm sorry, it's Siberia.
Siberia. I feel like Siberia even has better basketball teams. Yeah, I think I haven't really looked at the Russian league, but I suspect.
The prison league in Siberia are very competitive for sure.
Super. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure it is. Oh my god. But yeah, it was basically like so they tried to get Bradley Beal, and the Heat were willing to take him at one point, but they also wanted. There was something. Oh, the other problem too is actually like how Phoenix flipped that one pick, that 2031 pick for like three other
Mm,
firsts.
yep.
Well, what they did is they gave up their very valuable pick because they're going to be shit in 2031. They gave up a really valuable pick to get three worse first round picks, and Miami's like, we don't really want that garbage. So I'm just trying to remember how this article went, but basically, like the Heat eventually they were kind of negotiating with the Warriors, and they were also negotiating with Phoenix, and they were trying to work a three-team trade a little bit as well, which is always challenging because of course Phoenix is in second apron hell. And so then Phoenix was like, well, maybe we can move Kevin Durant. And so then there was the whole thing with the Warriors about potentially reuniting Kevin Durant. So they would trade Kevin Durant to the Warriors, and then Jimmy Butler would go to Phoenix.
Yeah.
And obviously, KD didn't really want to be traded. He wants to finish out at least his contract in Phoenix. He's not like in a hurry to leave necessarily, despite the team not being very good. I
He
think
didn't
he
want to go to
likes,
the Warriors either,
and he didn't
specifically.
want to go. Yeah, and he didn't specifically want to go to the Warriors to reunite with Steph Curry. I think him and Curry are cool, but it's just like it's not the right time, which I think is fair. I mean, I would have been interested to see it, to be honest. I think that would have been a better trade for Golden State than for Jimmy Butler, but anyway, we'll get there. So then that kind of fell through, and Phoenix discovered that, or sorry, Miami discovered that Phoenix was negotiating with the Warriors, and there was just like a whole bunch of like bullshit, and essentially Miami was finally like, okay, Golden State, like, let's just do this one on one here. Like, let's cut out the middlemen and people like that. So they ended up trading Jimmy to the Warriors for Andrew Wiggins and some stuff. And I think Andrew Wiggins, I think that they know he's not like the best player that they could have possibly gotten necessarily, but he's a very solid player. He'll fit in well with what Miami does. And Pat Riley does really like Jimmy Butler. There was also a piece of the article that came out and made its round on Twitter that when Jimmy Butler and Pat Riley first met, they were, when Pat Riley and Jimmy Butler were first, meeting when Jimmy first came to Miami, they were drinking some expensive wine and then talking about, who the best player that Jimmy played with in Minnesota was. And Jimmy said it was Andrew Wiggins, which then Pat Riley responded by like, oh, maybe you've had too much wine. But I think that Wiggins has always had the talent. It was just whether or not he had the motor for it, but he's always had the talent. So like it's probably a fair assessment that the best player that he played with in some ways was at Wiggins because I think he had the most potential. He just didn't really have the motor in Minnesota. So and then he turned into a great player in Golden State. The last couple of years have been tough, but I think he's a pretty well respected dude at least. Like people like him and whatever. So I don't know. The Heat didn't get probably what they wanted for Jimmy Butler, but at the end of the day, like he was also a toxic asset at the end to the way he acted and was acting. And I mean, yeah. Although Windhorst did talk a lot about too, though, how the Heat also kind of nobody was innocent in this situation because the Heat were setting Butler up to fail in terms of like the way they treated him. Like they gave him kind of unreasonable like benchmarks, and so of course like, they basically wanted to suspend him, but they couldn't. So they kind of set him up to be suspended. Like they announced that he was going to go to the bench like in front of everybody, and you don't really do that to a veteran player, especially not your star. And then some other stuff too. Like they kind of made it so he like, and they knew, right? They knew that Jimmy Butler is this kind of player who's going to do what he wants and overreact, not necessarily overreact, but he's gonna act out when he's frustrated and whatever. So they kind of purposely frustrated him so that he would do what he did and do too much so they could suspend him. So it was kind of an interesting thing because Windhorst talked about how they essentially baited Jimmy Butler into being Jimmy Butler and therefore they could suspend him. And so I thought that was really interesting and also a little shady, but that's the Heat for you.
I think if you're the Warriors, you're probably pretty excited that because Jimmy was like showing his whole ass that you got him for less than a player of his caliber would typically get. Even though he's older now and like kind of on the
Not
downslope,
available.
it was a pretty
Yeah.
reasonable price for Jimmy Butler. But at the same time, you're like, okay, what happens with Jimmy after the honeymoon phase? They only re-signed him for like a
2 years.
two-year extension after this year, but you still kind of wonder how quickly does Jimmy Butler wear out his welcome at places. It tends to be a little bit fast in certain spots. In Miami, he was able to be chill for a few years. Certain other places, it was like year two, and you got to
Success
wonder,
also the success in Miami I think was also probably why they got more time,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
They went to what like 3 finals in 5 years. And
mm,
so that helps. Winning solves a lot of problems. And I think that, and a lot of Jimmy's bullshit, for lack of a better term, is kind of also the things that we revere about Heat culture, right? Like the insane work ethic and like some of the, I don't know how to put it, even like just everything to win, like it doesn't matter winning, it doesn't matter what the cost is to win, right? And some of those like hard attitudes, right? Like players always do chafe sometimes at like the Miami structure, right? Because they can be assholes to players, but it's Heat culture. And so I think that a lot of the stuff that Jimmy, like a lot of his like bullying's not the right word, but you know what I mean, like his like antics kind of do fit
Mm.
in with like the toughness of Heat culture, and so it's easy to think there might
You know,
not be
Pat Riley heard
problems.
those stories about this time in Minnesota, and he was like, "Oh yeah, that's my kind of guy."
Absolutely, right? So I think it was a good match, but I do think that I honestly think it's just that like last offseason when Riley was talking about how he didn't want to pay a player who wasn't available. I think Jimmy's very easily slighted, and I don't think he has thin skin. I'm not trying to say that. He's just because of his whole he's got a chip on his shoulder for lack of a better way to put it. So he's easily slighted, and I think that hearing that,
Bag of chips
yeah, so
and
that
some and
whole
some.
handsome dip, a lot of dip on the chips. So he, to quote Drake, anyways, I feel gross now. So that's cool. But
I was thinking of the "you got too much dip on your chip" meme. I wasn't even thinking about Drake lyrics. I don't really be knowing Drake lyrics like
it
that.
wasn't
I
even
haven't been
actually a
in
Drake
Canada long
lyric.
enough to really
It
be thinking about
wasn't.
that.
It wasn't actually even a Drake lyric. He said it was when we were in the finals. And he's like, I want my chips with my, I want the dip with my chips,
When he
just to
was
be
the
fair.
mascot of the team after being a fan of every other team in the league for the
Yeah,
previous like 10
I'm
years.
glad that the Raptors have low key moved away from that. But anyway, I digress. Yeah, I think that Jimmy's I don't know, his antics. Yeah, I think he was very easily slighted by he is very easily slighted and like perceived disrespect. And it was disrespectful, honestly, of Pat Riley to say it. But at the same time, he was also a fair point where it's like, well, why would I give you a max contract when you've played very few games in the last few years? And yes, you're great in the playoffs, but at the same time, like we have to get to the playoffs, and you're part of that.
Not a
So
guarantee.
and Jimmy, in this article, it talked about how Jimmy had chafed at the idea that he was less of a part of the offense in this last little while. And the Miami Heat retort is like, well, you haven't been available, so we can't have an offense that runs through a player who's never here. But, like,
Makes it does make sense. I'm not gonna
right?
lie, it does make
It
sense.
does.
Hero is at work. Like I hate to say, but
Yeah.
like Tyler Hero is he's punching the clock. You got to give him the ball.
Yeah, right? Or, develop these young guys like Hawkes and Jovic. Like, they've turned into something. I mean, Hawk has more than Jovic, but still, like you gotta and Bam, right? Like they're showing up, they're there, and you gotta like work with the players you got. And if you're never gonna be there, then you can't have the offense run through you. Like I don't know. So kind of just a weird situation. It sucks because I really like Jimmy Butler, but it's like it's just becoming difficult because it's like I could understand. Okay, you're mad at Chicago, they fucked you over. Cool.
They
Minnesota,
did.
that was a weird exit. Like Tibbs, you asked Tibbs for a trade. And like I get it, they just chose to pay Cat and Wiggins over him, and like maybe questionable decision, but whatever. So then blows it up because Tibbs won't trade him. Fine. The Philly situation, I'm not even really sure what happened there. I think
You
he just
wanted to
thought
be
was
there. I think Philly
yeah, the
just kind
Philly
of
didn't want
pivoted
to pay
away.
him. Yeah, I think there was a Philly issue. So again, whatever. But it's now kind of reaching this point where it's like you blew it up on a team you wanted to be on and like
Mm.
pushed your way to get to. And then you blew it up like that. And it's like maybe at some point you are part of the problem. Like
Yeah,
I
if it
never want to
happens like four
accuse
times, it's like there's
like I
a one
never
common denominator.
yeah, I never want to be one of those people who's like blaming players for being locker room issues and all that because a lot of that language is obviously like coded and dog whistly and stupid and I don't ever want to be one of those people, but there is a point where it's like, well, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, like maybe Jimmy, just maybe, you are a part of the problem. And I guess the other challenge is it's like right now, it's like I don't think he has the self awareness to realize that like you're not worth the juice is not worth the squeeze right now because when you've been on the court, it hasn't exactly been great. Like it hasn't been bad, but you're not the same player. So like I don't know. A lot of antics for 13 points a game is not really great.
If you're the Warriors, I think there's two things you're excited about. One is that you have somebody who can like dribble into a shot, which you need. in the playoffs and also right now in the regular season. And then the other thing is you didn't have to give up Kuminga, so they can still play the is Kuminga our future game, what they've been playing for the last couple of years. So
Yeah, this offseason
it's good for them that they didn't have to give up anything like
big.
super essential to what they do.
Because they didn't really want to keep Wiggins long term, anyways. To be honest, I don't think. I don't know that they wanted to like get rid of him. Right? He wasn't like on the block, but he also wasn't a non-negotiable player for them. I think that they were kind of like, okay. He hasn't been the same player since that finals, so like, meh, not really a big loss. Although the way Steve Kerr talks about him is kind of sweet. He loves Andrew Wiggins. It's kind of adorable. I mean, I think Steve Kerr feels that way about most of his players, though, which is nice. It's refreshing. But yeah, the fit in Golden State's kind of interesting because I don't. It solves some problems, but I don't think it solves all of them. And the fact that like he's a very reluctant 3-point shooter as it is, and he's not great at it at the moment. And they already don't have a ton of spacing outside of Steph Curry, so it doesn't really alleviate that problem. But it does give them a bit more toughness, which they haven't really had outside of Draymond. But people don't really respect Draymond the same way anymore. So, because he's become a bit of a clown. So I think that that will help. And I think that they're going to get a very motivated Jimmy Butler, right? He's going to be on his best behavior for the next, at least year, probably.
He's gonna
And
rediscover his love of basketball, he said.
yeah, right? And he was like, I'm going to give the ball to Steph and move out the way. And it's like, okay, well, you're here to do more than that, but sure. I respect the deferential treatment of Steph Curry, understanding your place. But at the same time, yeah, I feel like they're going to get a motivated Jimmy Butler and he will help them. But I just don't think that it's like the move that pushes them over the top by any means. The Kaminga thing
I
will be
still think
really
they're a
fascinating
first or second round out. I don't think this really
if they even
substantially
get there.
changes things.
I don't
This
even
isn't
know that they're
2021 Jimmy, I don't think,
no, and I don't
anymore.
even I don't even know if they're gonna get to the playoffs. Frankly, they're definitely still a play-in team. I think, aren't they?
Let's go Spurs. They might take that spot, you know what I mean?
Right? Yeah.
Once Fox and Wemby start meshing. By the way, going back to the Spurs trade, I find it really interesting that they've been starting Fox and Chris Paul next to each other. I think
Yeah.
a lot of people thought this means that Chris Paul go back to the bench. They're playing them as a starting backcourt.
It's a
It's kind
very
of fun.
small starting backcourt, but I'm into it.
It sure is.
Because then they have Vassell on the wing, Vassell and Sochan, and then Wemby. Yeah. I mean, I guess you've got a pretty solid front court of defender. I mean, Vassell is not a super plus defender, but he's not bad. And then Sochan and Wemby are long and make up for a lot of shit. So that'll be interesting to see what happens. The Spurs are going to be fun. I do hope that I hope they take a playoff spot rather than a team like the Warriors. Because honestly, I don't really want to see the Lakers or Warriors. Well, maybe different now with Luka with the Lakers, but at least like they're just those old ass teams who like they can't compete like once you get to the playoffs like they're slow and old
Hmm.
and there's nobody else who can do anything but Steph Curry basically and like Draymond's still a good defender but at some point like that's not and he's honestly mostly a good defender because he's a good communicator and he knows where to be. He's not even physically necessarily at his like defensive peak anymore.
Mm.
So it's I don't know. I'm kind of tired of seeing some of these like legacy teams be in there when it's like you shouldn't be here. You are not good enough. I'm sorry. We know you're not going anywhere, and I still want to see Steph Curry in a playoff series. I still want to see LeBron. I still want to see KD. Like to be clear,
Yeah.
they are the stars, but it's just like your teams aren't good, and some of these decisions are because of you as a star making these choices, and or like in the case of Kevin Durant, especially in my opinion, because like you have to give up so much to get Kevin Durant that like by the time he gets there, the team's gutted. And then pair that with an owner like Matt Ishbia, who's just like I don't know,
Yeah.
thinks he
Even
knows.
if
He thinks he's God's
even
gift to
if
basketball because he won a
yeah,
national
because
championship
he
as the 15th man.
yeah as a walk on, yeah. Yeah, even if Aiden was never going to become what they hoped he could become, giving him up for Beal was maybe not the right move. But
Yeah,
speaking
just
of
questionable
legacy
choice.
teams, how about the Lakers? After picking up Luca, they were bereft of big man, and they decided they're gonna go get Mark Williams, super talented by the way, like an 18-9 guy already at like 23 years old, shoots like 60% from the damn field,
Yeah,
and the
super,
trade got
super.
rescinded, and it's a
Yeah,
little awkward. They put out a statement because he failed a physical, right? And
yeah. What was the Lakers'
they
actual
put
statement? I didn't get to read it.
so the Hornets put out a statement. I didn't see. I saw Palinka said something about like it's just something about the physical. It wasn't super interesting or insightful. It was kind of a bland no statement. But the Hornets, this is super interesting. So we're excited to welcome Mark back to our Hornets organization after the other team aggressively pursued Mark, trying to make it look like they weren't like, oh, we weren't trying to trade you. The Lakers just wanted you so bad. We made the difficult decision to move him. We've always held great respect for Mark's talent, work ethic, and character. We're thrilled to see him rejoin our roster as a dynamic presence at the starting center position. His return strengthens our team, and we look forward to the impact he'll make on and off the court. Yeah, they had to play damage control. We tried
Yeah.
to get rid of you, and it didn't work.
But I
We
do
didn't want to get rid of you that bad. The Lakers' offer was just that great.
think there's some truth to that, though, actually. And the reason I say that is just because of the price that they were going to get for Mark Williams. Like, they got everything that the Mavericks didn't get in the Luka trade. And so, to me, that kind of signaled to the Hornets, um, basketball Siberia. It kind of told me that, like, I don't think they were actively seeking out a market for Mark Williams. I just think that, like, if the right offer appeared, how can you turn down the picks that they didn't give up for Luka plus Dalton Connect is a solid young player, like it's one of those trade packages where I'm not going to say it's an offer you can't refuse, but it's like kind of close. And so I don't think that they were like actively shopping Mark Williams, but it was like, okay. And there was motivation, obviously. Like the Lakers were in a desperate position. They had to do something, and they know that they need lob catching bigs for Luka anyways, because Luka like went after he like begged the Mavericks for years to get him one, and then they got him two, and it went really well, right? They went to the
Went
finals.
to the finals.
So I think that like the Lakers were in a disadvantaged position and they had to go out and hunt something down. And they targeted Mark Williams, who again I don't think the Hornets were trying to like actively get rid of him, but his injury status has been a problem. Like he's got a history of back injuries and he's 23 and a big. And his defensive metrics are objectively awful. So it's questionable as to whether or not he can truly be like the anchor of a good defense anyways. That being said, the Hornets are awful, so it's hard to truly like gauge that. It would be different potentially on a team like the Lakers where actually they don't even have better defenders on the Lakers frankly, so probably wouldn't have been good either. But you have Luka and an aging LeBron around you, it's probably not the best place to be an anchor for defense. But regardless,
Mm. At least he's big.
he's big and he's bouncy and whatever, right? So like there's that potential, but I think the Hornets were kind of like, if we get to keep him, awesome. We like Mark Williams. If the right trade comes along, awesome, because we have some questions maybe. So I think there's an element of truth to the statement, but it is very funny and damage control-y for sure. I'm curious to see like the Lakers end of it. How did this is probably like a misunderstanding on my part of how the process works, but like it would be the Lakers doctors who were like, fuck no,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah. They said it wasn't the back problem that happened. And somebody speculated, man, his eye must have fallen off when he was on the treadmill or some shit.
Well,
I'm just
honestly
like,
though, because it's like, what else could like what are the Hornets? Because that's like shady, obviously. Like if it doesn't go
yeah,
through, because like about the back injury. Because obviously, like you can trade players who are injured. Like I mean, Luka got traded, but and he's injured. But obviously, like when the Lakers did their physical, they're like, okay, cool. The Mavericks doctors were probably on the right path or whatever. So it's like it almost seems like they're questioning Charlotte's medical team, and it's
yeah.
like it's just like a weird situation. Also, I have a fun story about eyes falling out. We'll return to that in a minute.
It sucks for the Lakers because like they desperately needed a center
Yeah.
and they got one right at the deadline, and the trade fell through for medical reasons, and they're not able to go back and get another one now. So they're just
Yeah.
stuck with what they with Jackson Hayes, man. It's time. It's
I
time to
saw
fulfill the
it's
promise
Jackson
that we thought you had in
New Orleans.
New Orleans,
Yeah.
I
It's
think.
Jackson Hayes time. Yeah, he was in New
Yep.
Orleans.
Jackson is Jackson. The Jackson Hayes era begins today.
The funniest part, the funniest thing, two funny tweets I saw. One was when they traded for Mark Williams, Dwight Howard was like, "See, the Lakers got a center. Stop calling me," because like fans have been like, "Dwight, go back." Really funny. But second, the funny part too was I saw a meme yesterday after the trade got rescinded that was like had a picture of Dalton Connect's face like superimposed over a doctor, and it was like the medical team who rescinded the trade.
Yeah, he don't want to go to Charlotte, I don't think. I mean, yeah, nah.
No.
I know he was enjoying being a Laker, even if uh, even if some of them boys don't look that great in the yellow.
Mm-mm. Objectively terrible.
Sorry, the Luca photos were not flattering, man. Sp-
Oof. Oof.
Speaking of the Luca thing, I was watching. Oh my God, like the fan protests outside of American Airlines Center.
Oh my god, yeah.
There were people chanting, "Bring him back. He's not
He's not
fat."
fat. Chef's
It's
kiss.
so good,
I do think it's
so
very
good.
illuminating. It's super illuminating to me, though, what white Americans are willing to protest over and not willing to protest over. But anyway,
I thought
neither here nor
it
there.
was just funny because
It's
it
hilarious.
was funny just because like
The coffin, the whole ass funeral, like they're just doing too much, but it's amazing. But I don't blame them because like this is like malpractice by Nico Harrison. Um,
I can't
anyways,
remember
can
what
we
player it was, but he was like, if he's really 270 pounds and he's getting buckets like that, then shit, like I want to be 270.
oh, was it? It was Dorian Finney-Smith. It was Dodo.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it was Dodo. But a few other players that's like have like come to Luka's defense in a way that they
Yeah.
never came to Jokic's defense, which I find very interesting. Probably because I
He
think
seems unknowable, I think, to players who aren't on his team in a way that maybe Luka doesn't.
that's
Luka's
fair.
probably more chummy.
Well, and Luka cooks people in a more like traditional way, like the Kobe kind of
Right.
like
86
ISO,
crossovers,
yeah, like
step back in
handles,
your
like
face,
whereas like Jokic does
talks
it, but
hella
it
shit, talks
yeah, like
hella.
Yo
I think players respect players who talk shit to them
yeah.
when they're scoring on them. Yeah.
My favorite is like Jokic's trash talk is just so subtle because when you do get hit with
Yeah.
one, it's like that's like it'll
Brother, I
knock you.
have
It's
47.
right, like that kind of stuff is like his trash talk is like rare but devastating.
Yeah.
Like when it
Yeah.
comes through, you're
Yeah.
like he just
That
bodied that
story
man.
for people who don't know it, it was a game. I think it was Jamal Murray was talking about this.
Yeah,
They're playing I think
Rudy.
Utah back then,
Yeah, when Rudy
and
was still there.
Rudy was like, "Oh, I got him, no double team, no double team," and Jokic is like, "Brother, I have 47."
Yeah, because I think that was actually a game, and it might have been. I think the game that they were alluding to was when the Nuggets had to go into Utah with like seven players, and they hadn't won in Utah in like 5 years or more. Like it had
Yeah,
been a really long time. They'd been dominating the Jazz everywhere else, but in Utah they could never win. They went in with like seven players, and like Jokic just like murdered. He had like 30 rebounds or some crazy shit. Like he destroyed the Utah Jazz by himself. I love that story.
yeah.
But anyways,
It used to
another
be hard to win in Utah with that elevation and the
yeah,
racism. I mean, the
and the
racism
racism,
stayed, the elevation also stayed, but the team is in a perpetual
garbage,
rebuild now. They're in
hot garbage.
infinite rebuild.
Yeah.
That's how you save your job, GMs.
Yeah.
Never try to be good.
Never try to be good. Never be too bad, but never be
Expectations are
too
how you
good.
let people down.
Exactly. They're lowering they're breaking their standards faster than they can lower them.
Exactly, exactly.
But a quick digression into the eye story because it's really funny. So when you sent me that post about how Mark Williams' eye must have fallen out on the treadmill, it made me think about this time where I actually was in the presence of someone whose eye fell out. So I was doing a tasting somewhere, and the one guy he has a fake eye, and I didn't know it for sure, but he just like I
I
could
was concerned it was a real lie because you kind of buried the
no.
lead on that
So it
earlier.
was a fake eye. It was a fake eye, but it's a really good one. So I didn't totally know that it was fake, but I like his
Yeah.
eye was always a bit off. But I'm like, I don't know if it's a fake eye necessarily, or he just like has something going on, right? Never thought about it. And so I'm like doing this tasting, whatever. He like tries this wine. Literally, like as he takes a sip, his eye falls out, and he's like, oh shit, and he like turns away and whatever. And it was just like it's one of those things where telling the story is not quite as funny. Like being there was just like so shocking because you're like, I have never seen someone's eye just
Yeah,
pop
how
out
do
of
you
their
respond to that?
fucking
Like, hey, you need
face.
help?
Honestly, I laughed. I couldn't stop laughing. It was the funniest thing in the world. And like I've got a bit of a relationship with this person. Like I've
Yeah,
worked
yeah.
with him a bit, so like it wasn't like a mean like I'm like, "Oh, are you okay?" But then we just like both like stood there laughing for like 10 minutes because it was like, "What the fuck?" He's like, "I'm so sorry. This has never happened before. Like, I am so sorry you had to see that." And I was like, "It's cool, man. Like, I don't know what the hell just happened, but it's cool." And so we were joking that the wine was so good it makes your eyes fall out.
Damn,
Yeah.
damn. That's at least 92 points from wine enthusiasts right there. Like,
Gotta be, yeah. It's like instead of knocking your socks off, it knocks your eye out. It's like, what the fuck? It was the strangest experience, very funny. But shout out to Marty. I love that guy. But yeah, I saw something I did not need to see. And so every time someone mentions an eye falling out, I'm like, well, actually, I've experienced this. It's fucking weird.
that's wild. That's
So
wild.
funny. Yeah. Anyway, back to
Oh man.
basketball.
Speaking of oft injured centers getting traded, Yusuf Nurkic is a one-way ticket to Siberia after complaining about not talking to the coach for months and being taken out, going from the starting lineup to being taken out of the rotation
Entirely.
entirely.
Yeah.
Oh, Nurkic and the first went for Cody Martin, Vasilije Micic,
Micic.
and the second. They had to attach one of those three firsts they got from that weird consolidation trade
To
just to
get
get
rid of
rid of
Nurk.
Nurkic. Like that's how far his value has fallen.
It's tough. Honestly, like, I'm not really a big Nurkic fan necessarily, but I do feel like that situation was always doomed to fail because he's not the right kind of big to put around Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. Like, he never was a
For a
good
team that
fit
doesn't have
anyway.
a power forward, like a power forward as power forward, having him be like the defensive
Yeah.
backstop for a team of like smaller perimeter guys always seemed doomed to fail. Aiden made more sense there. Aiden was just having problems with the organization. And when they traded
Yeah.
him for Nurkic specifically, I was like, have you?
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind
Perhaps
of.
not.
Seems like you've ignored Trailblazers tape for a while. Yeah, I don't know. Phoenix is. I think they're really living up to the award we gave them at midseason, the Eagleton You Blew It Super Hard Complete Buffoonery Award. And they've earned it again at the trade deadline with how they dealt with the Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal situations. Um, Congratulations on really, really earning that Eagleton Award there because it's complete buffoonery in Phoenix right now. And like the worst part for them is that like their best recourse now is to trade Devin Booker, to trade the superstar that wants to be there.
Yeah, that's the only way to
Because
get like future value
anything,
back. But like the guy just broke. He drafted and developed him. He was like a mid
yeah,
first round pick, not even like a top five guy, and he just became your franchise's all time leading scorer in his 20s for a franchise that's been around since the 60s. If you trade him, people will be fucking devastated.
and he's still so
But
young. Like that's the
how
wildest
else do
part.
you get good? It sucks. It really sucks for Phoenix.
Because
Unless they
they
can pull
did,
some magic out
yeah,
in the offseason with Durant or something. Because Beal's trade value right now is possibly
negative.
negative. You might have to attach that other first to trade him
Yep.
into a cap space team like the Charlotte Hornets, where he can
Well, and the
reunite
worst
with his
part,
buddy Yusuf Nurkic.
but you can't even do that because Beal won't say
Because he has to
yes.
agree to it. Yeah,
Oh, actually,
it's
one of the teams, ironically, one of the
his agent,
teams,
Hall of Fame, first ballot Hall of Fame agent.
100%. Also, like
Yeah,
first ballot Hall of Fame failure on the Wizards' part. But speaking of the Wizards, they were actually listed in the Windhorst article as one of the two teams that were willing to take Beal back in like a salary dump situation, which makes sense because they were going to get a pick out of Phoenix, right, to do it. So like, why not bring back a franchise legend who like the fans still love him? He's not
Walker
necessarily gonna.
franchise legend
It's the Wizards.
in Wizards.
It's the Wizards, baby. They don't
The
care.
Bullets were good. That's so disappointing, man.
I
DC
know.
deserves a good team. They
I
really do.
agree. They really do. But it's crazy how much talent comes out of Prince George County and then they still can't do anything good. The Wizards
It's a
themselves,
shame.
actually, sorry. But,
It's
anyways,
a shame. I remember when they tried to chase Durant, he was like,
he thought about it, but I respect. Like, I actually wouldn't have hated the Wizards taking him back because it's like, use your cap space, get the pick. You get a player who, at the end of the day, is familiar with Washington. The fans still like him, even if he's not as good, right? Because it's not exactly like the Wizards are trying to win. So, like, you'd have the good. He did a lot for the community and stuff like that, right? Like, he was an
yeah,
important
yeah,
player to that franchise. He wasn't John Wall, but he was up there, and he stayed for a long time. So I feel like, well, part of that was because their front office is idiots, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah, they. It would have been, I think, good to be honest. It would have been a better move, but I think that he. I don't know. He said I think he was even amenable to Washington actually for some reason, and then I don't remember exactly. I read the article a little while ago. I don't remember exactly what fell through, but basically yeah, Phoenix is in a rough position. And like the worst part with the Devin Booker thing too is it's not even like he's an older. He's fucking young still. Like Devin Booker was really young when he came into the league. Like I swear he was like 19 in 2 days.
yeah,
Like he
yeah,
he was a baby, and he's been in the league for like a decade, and he's still
yeah.
not 30 yet.
Babyface for like the first 5 years of his career.
Like I actually think he was just barely 19 when he got drafted. Like because there's
Yeah,
no like he's been in the league for like 10 years basically, and he's like still not even 30. So it's like
yeah. Went
that's
from coming
tough.
off the bench in Kentucky to being the Phoenix Suns' all-time leading scorer. It's a franchise that's had Steve Nash, Amari Stoudemire,
Yep.
fucking Walter Davis,
Charles Barkley.
Charles fucking Barkley, like the all-time leading scorer in his 20s, and like it's it feels like it's looming that at some point, unless they find a clever way to get value out of Durant, it kind of feels like it's gonna be difficult unless you hit like really, really hit on something in the draft. Like you hit like you got the number 25 pick and you strike fucking gold. I don't know how they're gonna build
I don't
a
think they're
long-term competitor.
and
What's the
I
team
don't
gonna look like when Booker turns 30? They're gonna look
and
like cheeks.
and I don't even think that like their frankly like their draft history has been that good. Like they struck on Cameron Johnson and Mikal Bridges and like a few players, but really they haven't
And they're
struck
gone
on and they're gone
because they traded them.
for Kevin Durant. Like the sunk
At
cost.
least the KD trade was defensible. Like even Mikal Bridges at the time, he was hurt about getting traded because he
Yeah.
loved playing in Phoenix. He loved the organization. And when they asked him about it in an interview, he said, "Yeah, but I got traded for Kevin Durant." Like you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Even
Which
he
I
was like, "Yeah,
get.
it's KD."
Which I get. Like it's a stars league, you got to go after stars. But was it actually worth it? Because the team has not been good since then. They were better off, frankly, building around
Yep,
Booker with those kinds of players, I think.
yep.
Like, as much as Kevin Durant's a great player, I still don't even think he's really been that good in Phoenix. Not to the same level he was in Brooklyn, even.
Yeah, he had that one season where he was crazy efficient, and then just playoffs came and they just got smashed.
But I mean, he barely
Got
played
smashed.
even. He was super efficient, but he didn't when he played, but he didn't play a lot because he's been injured. So it's like, I get it's a stars league, but at the same time, it's like age does matter, unless you're LeBron, in which case,
Yeah,
whatever.
he's just he
You
put
made
up like
a
42 and 17 and 8 the other day at age 40. Like that's just
yeah.
I
Unless
don't
you're unless you're LeBron and you've made a deal with the devil, like realistically, age matters, and especially injury history matters. Like LeBron hasn't had the same injury history that Kevin Durant has had, and it matters. And like I not to
if
just
I
I
did Braun's fitness routine for one day, I would never want to move ever again.
no, and I don't want to sound like I'm disparaging Kevin Durant because I love Kevin. I respect the hell out of Kevin Durant. He's a star, and you kind of have to. I don't think you have to make that trade. I still think there was like other stars available. Maybe not Kevin Durant level, but you already have Devin Booker, who's amazing. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I
I
always
could see
thought that
pursuing
trade.
a De'Aaron Fox would have been cool, right? Like
Yeah, like I thought that trade was
with all
all
those wings they had.
not to like I don't know rehash the Kevin Durant trade, but I feel like even at the time I was not super excited about it because I was like, you're hamstringing your team a
Yeah.
lot. Like you're banishing Chris Paul, and then which fine, you know he wasn't the same player by any means, but he did a lot for that franchise. And then like you're getting Kevin Durant, who great, he's gonna score and he's gonna be good, but like you're not fundamentally actually helping your team get better because you have to give up so much to get him. Like
Yeah.
scoring wasn't really an issue in Phoenix, and then you gave up all the good defense to be a team that you
All of it.
have to score a million points. Like that series against Denver when Denver ended up going on to win the championship. It was like the only reason they took a game or two off Denver is because Kevin Durant and Devin Booker got like historically hot.
Oh yeah, they had the two of
Like
they back-to-back games. They had two of the greatest shooting performances I have ever seen, and that's what it took to win two home games
two games.
by a little bit.
Yeah. Against like the best player in the world.
Like
So
they were on the game is cheating level of hot shooting in those two games. Like it was unfucking
yeah, it
reasonable.
was definitely some NBA 2K shit.
It was
Like in
NBA Jam shit. Like
yeah.
the ball was on fire. It was terrifying.
Actually, right?
Yeah.
I remember actually like having mild panic attacks watching that because I was obviously rooting for Denver and I was like, "Oh my god. Like what the fuck?" But then of course it came back to earth because you can't rely on that. Like you can't rely on having to outscore everyone. It's not a sustainable like way to path to the it's not a sustainable path forward. So, I don't know. I think in hindsight like I honestly at the time I really was never that high on the trade. I was like, okay, like I'm excited to see Kevin and Booker together. I just about called them Kevin Booker. I was excited to see them
The
together.
couple names.
K Book. I was excited to see them together, like because obviously it's two generational scorers next to each other, so I'm like excited. But like, I guess is Devin Booker a generational scorer? Whatever, doesn't matter. We put them next together. You're like, okay, like that'll be fun. But I'm like, I never really thought it had a high ceiling in the first place because you lost everything else that was good. Yeah, I don't
It
know.
was like it felt like the Carmelo trade to me. Where it was like we
Yeah,
had Amare and a bunch of really good like young wings and stuff. The team was playing. I mean, the Suns obviously pre-KD trade were much better than the than the pre-Carmelo trade Knicks, but it was similar vibe. It was like, okay, we have this one star and a bunch of really good players around him, not stars, but like really good players.
yeah.
And then they were like, we're gonna trade all of those guys for a second star who's a little redundant with the main one.
And also a dude who was about to be a free agent in Carmelo. Look, at
I'm still
least,
mad about that trade.
yeah, at
They
least
had the
Kevin
space to
Durant,
sign him in free agency too. It's
right?
crazy.
At least Kevin Durant had years on his contract. But the challenge with that was that with the Kevin Durant thing was like it was the same thing as the Carmelo thing though. He only wanted to go to Phoenix, and so therefore Phoenix got
Yeah,
fleeced.
yeah. Wanted to
Like
play
the
with
leverage
Kate.
isn't
Wanted to play
there.
with Book. Wanted to play with Book. They
The
respected him so much.
leverage wasn't there, right? So like for Phoenix to get anything other than Kevin Durant, like they had to overpay. And so then of course you're gutting your team. And the Suns may never have like I think there's like a higher ceiling pairing Kevin Durant and Devin Booker together in theory, obviously, but I think that their floor would have been so much higher if they'd stayed the course. And I think just maybe like I don't know, this is obviously a big what if because we'll never know. But if they had managed to keep that team together, at least to some extent, like maybe you make moves on Aiton still, because obviously that culture thing, it's questionable as to whether it was going to fit. Like that whole thing, they jerked me around, right? So, like, deal with the Aiton situation. Chris Paul, like, he was probably on his way out, same thing. But, like, make those moves on the fringes. But keep Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, I keep wanting to call him Michael. Keep Bridges, keep Johnson, keep Booker together. You're going to have a pretty solid floor there. You can make other moves on the fringes, and if Devin Booker is as good as he is, which we know he is, and he was at the time, you're gonna get other free agents. It's not like people don't want to play in Phoenix. And if anything, they'd want to play more in Phoenix because it shows that the organization's finally like a little bit stable after
It's
decades
warm in
of
the winter too.
starver.
It's at 75 degrees in January, man.
Right? Like it's not. It's a market players have always wanted to be in. So
8
it's
million
not.
in July, but
Yeah, I experienced that. It's like the face of the sun.
my God, it is brutal.
I have never experienced heat like that in my life. I've experienced like the opposite of cold. Like I've experienced -50, but I've never experienced +50. And I was like, I am not built for this.
It's so hot sometimes in Phoenix that it turns every object in your environment into like a dangerous weapon.
Molten
Like you
lava.
you
Yeah.
can't interact with anything. I couldn't touch my steering wheel until the car like AC been running for a couple
Yeah.
minutes. Parking lots feel like you put your entire head inside the oven. It's
Yeah.
tough. It's tough.
Oh yeah, I thought I was gonna. We went to Jerome, and I thought I was gonna like pass out after shooting one bucket. I was like, holy fuck! It is 5,000 feet elevation and +48. Like this is an ill-advised decision.
Jerome is a I hated the drive to Jerome too. It is perilous and I did not enjoy it.
It's some switchbacky shit.
It
Switchbacky
sucked.
shit. Cool little
Sucked a
town though.
lot.
Very cool town. Super
Yeah,
cool
they had
town though.
there was
The
a joint
10,000.
I went to
The
that had burgers named after like like old West
yeah.
prostitutes. It was interesting. It was interesting. They had wineries
We
there
went to
too.
a
Decent wine. Decent wine.
yeah. It's actually not there, but it's from the Wilcox Valley. Not bad though. We did do some wine tasting. Wilcox Valley really grows really good Sangiovese. They had
Uh-huh.
100% Sangiovese there. It was good. We went to a Mexican restaurant. It was really tasty. We really liked Jerome. My uncle told us to go there. It was really cool. Loved it, but yeah, it was so hot. The one thing I did not like was on the drive. There's like the one highway you go down where there's like a roundabout every fucking, I don't know, quarter mile, and you're like, for what reason? Like, why?
Well,
Why are there
I went the
12
other
roundabouts
way.
on the way here?
I
What
went
the
the
fuck?
other way from Prescott and it was disgusting. It
Yeah,
was
we
the
came from
worst
Phoenix.
drive I've ever been on. The
We
worst
were
I've ever
driving
been
from
on in
we
my
came from
life.
Scottsdale, and there was like on the highway. I swear to God, every quarter mile was another roundabout. We went through. I counted. We went to 14 roundabouts on one stretch of highway. Who does that?
The road I drove down was so it was a highway, right? It was one lane each way. It was 30 miles per hour max because it was so twisty. There were falling rock signs and crossing animal signs, and it's a sheer drop. There's no barrier. I had a panic attack for most of the drive, and there's no turns for like an hour stretch. So you just can't like once you're on it, you're just on it. I was having an extremely
Yeah,
bad time. I would like to go on the record as saying
that would be
had a good
terrible.
time in
Yeah,
Jerome.
coming from
Never
Phoenix.
going back ever.
Well, if you come from the Phoenix way, it's better. The only sketchy road is just
Yeah,
the mountain road up.
yeah.
But I mean, whatever. I'm used to that. I'm used to doing it in the snow, so it was actually refreshing to just get to do it in dangerous heat. But anyway, back to the basketball.
Internet connection problems.
I don't know. Phoenix is like a weird situation, and they really fucked up. And I'm curious to see how the rest of the season goes. Like, I know that Kevin Durant is a professional and whatever, but I'm really curious to see what he does at the end of his contract. I think he's got one more year after this year, right?
Believe so. I don't know that there's championship contention in his near future unless something shakes up in Phoenix. Like they absolutely pull a they'd have to fleece somebody. They'd have to fleece somebody. Like they'd have to take their wallet,
Well,
their
a lot of
pants,
teams are keeping their powder
everything.
dry for 2026 cap space,
I just don't see it
including
happening
Miami,
with
which
this
is
roof
why
right
they
now.
took back Wiggins in that trade because he only had enough. Sorry, you cut out really bad there. Everyone's keeping their powder dry for 2026, and so I think that like Kevin Durant will have options in free agency because I know Miami took back Wiggins because they don't want money past 2026. A lot of teams didn't. So I suspect that Kevin Durant could have contention outside of Miami or outside of Phoenix. Like he'll have to leave though. Unless to your point they do something interesting. But I don't think they can. They're pretty limited. Unless they trade Booker, which isn't going to help you. So, and if anything, that'll probably alienate Katie more. So, interesting.
Only way
I
Phoenix gets
also
back there is if they trade for somebody who's not that good, who suddenly becomes very good.
good. Kind of like a
Yeah.
Shea, not even like a Shea, find the next Shea kind of situation where you're trading for a
Right, and
prospect who's
that's
like good, but like you're
unlikely.
not sure. Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
actually, speaking of the Clippers who traded Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, they picked up Bogdan Bogdanovic from the Hawks. The Hawks made some moves, so they traded Bogdan to the Clippers, which I kind of like that move. I'm a little pissed.
Like for the Clips.
I'm a little pissed because as a Nuggets like appreciator, because I really wanted them to get Bogey because Bogey plays obviously very well next to Jokic on the Serbian national team. And they kind of need another like just decent guard because Westbrook's been hurt and Murray's been Murray. They just need kind of someone else, and Bogey's comfortable coming off the bench, and that second unit probably needs a little bit of love. And the Clippers didn't really give up that much to get Bogey. So I feel like Denver could have given up something to get him.
Mhm.
But anyway, they also probably needed the fact the Nuggets did nothing at the deadline was a bit interesting. And then Calvin Booth and Michael Malone are pointing fingers at each other, so that's interesting, especially regarding Zeke Nagy. I'm a little bit nervous for Malone because I suspect that Calvin Booth, there's going to be a power struggle there, and I'm not sure who's going to win, but Calvin Booth has hiring and firing power, so I suspect he might. I don't know. But it's hard to get rid of a coach like Malone who
Yeah.
is objectively a very good coach and has been a great coach for a player like Jokic. And you're going to have players in that locker room who go to bat for Malone, so that'll
The
be
only
interesting.
championship winning coach in franchise history as well. Like that's
Yeah.
you
And one of
can't
the
can't we
longest
can't
tenured
forget about
coaches
that.
and one of the longest tenured coaches in the NBA, frankly. He gets the best out of his team, to be honest. I mean, he's not always the best at developing young players, but it's hard when you're a winning franchise, right? He was a great developer when they weren't winning. See also Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. Like,
See also DeMarcus Cousins.
yeah, right? But I mean,
He
like, if
loved
you
that
look,
man. That's the only
it's,
coach he liked.
right? And it's like, if you look at, like, the Nuggets, it's like, it's not like they were always great. Like, he's the one who took the risk to put Jokic in the starting lineup. He's the one who, like, he leaned into these young players, and now they're really good. So it's like I can't really blame him for struggling. And he's played really. He's had like Christian Brown's had a good role, so it's not like it's impossible for rookies. There's just non-negotiables for Michael Malone, which is defense, and that's where Michael Porter Jr. always kind of struggled when he was like a young player. Anyway, Nuggets aside, back to the Clippers.
Wait,
I
how
really like.
we? Oh, never mind. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I really like the. Yeah, I got there because I wanted them to trade for Bogey. I really like the Bogey move for the Clippers, especially because the Clippers didn't really give up anything. They give up Man, Bones, who wasn't really playing, and like a second or two, so it was pretty decent. And Bogey, I think, will be a really nice fit there. He's just a good, solid guard. Like, he's a good scorer. He can get hot. He's going to fit really nicely next to Kawhi Leonard and James Harden and Norman Powell, so, like, I like that trade. The Hawks also traded DeAndre Hunter to the Cavaliers, which is a fun trade that I kind of like, too.
Let's go pick up for the
The
Cavs.
the Cavs needed a player like because I think the dream of DeAndre Hunter being the ultra efficient scoring defender is gone. But I don't think that the Cavs need that from him. They have enough scoring. They need a wing defender who's rangy and can absorb players like Giannis. You know, like who can be big defenders. Because DeAndre is definitely a rangy defender. So kind of dug that move. And again, they didn't really give up a whole lot.
Yeah, Karis LeVert, George Niang in 3 seconds and two swaps. I mean, yeah, Niang and LeVert are useful, but I think the Cavs have kind of been looking at solving the small forward issue for like several seasons now. And I think
Until they're
Hunter's a
on
really good
length,
fit for
really.
them. Yeah.
And Hunter can play up a bit too. He can play the power forward too. I think he's naturally a power forward. So the Cavs kind of got a player again who's a little maybe too big to be a small forward, but he's going to be a solid. He's mobile enough that it'll be totally fine. And they sold high on Karis LeVert, who's having like a career year in like he's been having one of the best, most efficient seasons of his entire career. And I think it was smart of the Cavs to bet that that probably wouldn't happen again. And so if you can get a player who just fits better with what you're trying to do, I think that that's a good trade. But I guess one of the more interesting moves in the East was Kyle Kuzma. He's a Milwaukee Buck.
Middleton era is done.
Yeah,
I mean, I know they loved him out there, kind of been declining. Injuries have been really
killed him.
fucking it up for him the last few years. Still
Ruined it.
kind of efficient in spurts, but just not available that consistently.
They
I'm
need his...
surprised that Kuzma was the guy they picked up for him, though. Definitely not
Yeah,
the shooter that Middleton is from the outside. He's also randomly forgot how to make free throws this season, which is deeply
yeah.
weird.
It's been interesting though, because after the first couple games, like Kuzma's definitely offered a different look to the Bucks, like in a positive way than I expected. Steve Jones Jr. He does really cool film breakdowns on Twitter from the dunker spot, but he does really cool breakdowns on Twitter, and he did one about what Kuzma's kind of adding to their offense, where he's just like he's actually a pretty smart. He is very adaptable, right? So like he can kind of fit in next to a lot of players, and he's offered like some interesting kind of looks next to Dame. And because the thing with the Bucks is I actually don't think they need the 3-point shooting as much, because like they've had AJ Green really like come through as a great shooter. Dame is back to being really good from three. Lopez's 3-point efficiency I think is back up again. So they haven't really needed as much like spacing, and like spacing comes in different forms. I think everyone assumes that spacing is only when you have good shooters around you, but like players like Jakob Poeltl are a good example of where you don't need to be a great 3-point shooter to be able to create good space. And Kuzma's like a pretty decent passer when he's like motivated to, which on a team like the Bucks he will be, because you play next to two superstars, so you don't really have a choice. And kind of like a Bobby Portis situation where it's like he was not great on his own, but you bring him to a good team, and all of a sudden he offers something really useful. So I don't know. It's turned out so far a very small sample size. It's been like, what, 3 games? 2, 3 games? So it's been better than I anticipated. But on the face of it, I was like, this is an interesting choice. I don't really know why they targeted Kuzma other than, I don't know, maybe if who else was available.
Super available. He was trying to get out for sure.
Which
He
is
kind of
hilarious
basically
because he refused
he
to leave. He
basically
didn't want to
said
leave last
publicly
year.
like, I'm not trying to mentor these young players. I'm just trying to get my buckets.
The funny part is that he didn't want to leave last year when he had the chance to go somewhere better. He could have gone to Dallas. I'm kind of glad he didn't. I think the PJ Washington move was better, but
Yeah, he was a good role player on that Lakers championship team. Like he was
yeah,
actually a reasonably important piece over there.
absolutely. I think when you go to a team like the Wizards, it's kind of like that traditional like good player on bad team situation where it's like their level comes down to the level of the team, which is generally terrible. So, and you have a player like Kuzma who will take buckets when you give him to him. When you give him the chance, he will take it. So, and I don't blame him. So,
He can
and
defend a
same,
little bit too. He can defend a little bit. He's pretty
yeah,
decent on that end.
yeah. So, I don't know. It's been interesting. It sucks that the Middleton era is over, but unfortunately, it was already kind of over from like a.
Now he got to be out there doing the mentor thing. Hopefully he winds up somewhere more competitive like next season if he's able to like rebound a little bit physically. But
The Wizards
I
made
don't
some
know. It
weird
might.
moves though, because they also picked up Marcus Smart from the Grizzlies.
Yeah, man. The Grizzlies basically. It seems like they salary dumped Marcus Smart a little bit
They
because I
did.
don't think they were. I don't. This is just me projecting. I don't think they were targeting Marvin Bagley as a player they really wanted to pick up. Same with Johnny Davis. No disrespect to either of them, but I don't think the Grizzlies were like, yes, these are the guys that make us champions.
Give me that. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
from what it sounds like from Tim McMahon, because he kind of covers the Grizzlies a bit, that the Marcus Smart thing just never really worked out. Like, not that there was any like big, there was no personality issues. It wasn't anything to do with that kind of stuff. It's just that Marcus Smart's game just didn't really fit with what the Grizzlies did. And his Defensive Player of the Year award was probably kind of fake. So I kind of think I'm not like the biggest Rudy defender. I feel like Gobert got robbed that year though. He probably should have won it, and Wemby should have gotten it probably last year. But yeah, it's kind of weird. I don't think
Was that
that
the year that Mikal Bridges was a runner-up when Smart won it? Or
maybe
my
could
might
have
have been.
been.
He came really close one year. He
I
got
think
like
Rudy
second.
got screwed because the rest of his team couldn't defend around him, basically. And people kind of underappreciated Rudy Gobert at that point. But what he actually offers on defense. But yeah, I don't know. Marcus Smart winning that year was very weird. And I don't think that I don't know. He's also declined a lot. Like he's had some injury issues in Memphis. I mean, he missed most of last year when they needed him most when they didn't have Ja. It's kind of why they traded for him. And then he missed most of it with injuries. And then I don't know. He's just been kind of weird. It hasn't really fit. He didn't really fit the team, frankly. The Grizzlies just were like, you know what, whatever. We know it's not working. No sense trying to make it work longer. That like we already spent the sunk. It's a sunk cost. Like may as well just move on. And
They had to
kind
attach
of
a pick too,
yeah, which sucks.
which
But
yeah.
I kind of respect it though, where they're like, you know what, we fucked up. Let's move on.
Hmm.
Correct and go forward. Because yeah, I don't really know who did they actually get for Marcus Smart.
Who
I
the
don't even
Grizzlies
know.
get?
Yeah.
The Grizzlies. Sorry, I have it pulled up here.
Oh, they got Marvin
Grizzlies got Marvin
Bagley,
Bagley, Johnny Davis in a second. Yeah, nothing too exciting.
but they don't really need any of those players that badly. Like they're a good team top to bottom. Jaren Jackson Jr. has been amazing, and Brandon Clark is back having a really great season too. So like as a big perspective, they just need depth. It's not, and Santi Aldama's been really good. So they don't really need Marvin Bagley. He's kind of just good depth, I guess, which is hilarious to say about a second overall pick.
Right? It's better than being out of the league, which I think was where some people thought he was going to wind up based on the
Yeah,
way the last few years are going.
right. Kind of like what I expected to happen to James Wiseman until the Raptors were like, actually, we want in on that. But
Fuck it, why not? Any young player who looked like they had potential at some point, let's just go grab them. Speaking of the Raptors, your team, which we
yeah,
somehow haven't talked about yet, y'all have
so
Brandon Ingram.
they did a lot. Yeah, we got. The more I've slept on it, the more I'm like a little higher on it now. So the Raptors got Bi, the Pelicans got Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, a first round pick, which was actually New Orleans' own pick, and a second round pick. So I like it better knowing that that 26 first rounder wasn't actually a Raptors first rounder. It was New Orleans getting their pick back. That made me feel a little better about it. And the other thing was too, I didn't really. So like Eric Koreen in the Athletic is generally like one of the largest pessimists that I'll ever read, and I generally kind of agree with him on lots of things because I like the honesty. Frankly, he's not really afraid to like kind of roast the team if they deserve it, which I like. He does it in a respectful way too. Like it's not like he's calling people a bunch of bums or anything like that. He's just
Right.
like,
He's
I
not
don't
a
think.
Steinbaum or whatever.
No, he's not trying to be like, he's not making player evaluations necessarily. He's making an evaluation on like what he thinks is probably like just how the team should go forward, right? So, and he maintains good relationships with players. Like it's not like he's not an asshole, basically. He's just kind of a crusty man, but I respect it because the older I get, the more I'm like, yes, I'm with you, buddy. But anyway, so his thing with the Ingram was kind of like, well, at first he was like, what the hell? Like, why are you doing this? Like, we already, like, established that, like, we need the younger players to play more. But at the same time, those veterans like Bruce Brown, his market was kind of not the same. Kelly Olynyk was helpful to the team, but if you're relying too much on Kelly Olynyk, it's probably not great long term for your young players, anyways. And this is also going all in on a situation with Scotty where like it's kind of being proven now that he's not going to be your first option as a scorer, and that's okay because he's a really excellent passer. He's got that like magic or that magic point guard kind of vibe to him. He's a very good passer. He's a good enough scorer and when he's in the right kind of role, but he's like just a very good all around good player, right? Like he's one of those players who's gonna get you solid assists, solid rebounds, solid points. Like he's never gonna be, he's kind of almost like a poor man's LeBron in that kind of sense, where he's like gonna fill the
Mm.
stat sheet. And then I think that having a pure scorer like Brandon Ingram also will help put Emmanuel quickly back in a better, more comfortable role on the offense as well, because he can kind of focus on how to be a point guard. So I do think it kind of does clarify a lot of stuff in that way. I don't think it helps the spacing situation, but yeah, I don't know. I'm still unsure of it, but I'm willing to I'm willing to see how it goes. BI
Are
is a
we
very
seeing a
talented
return?
player, so
Are we seeing a return of the man? I hope everyone on the roster is between 6'6" and 6'9"
Project
era
Six
that
Nine.
Masai was trying to yeah, Project 6'9",
That's what we called it as on Raptors Twitter. Was Project Six.
6'9" Mafia.
I don't. Yeah, I don't think so. Only in the sense that like he's not trying to trade Pirtle, and which I thought might have been on the table a little bit. Maybe to just get picks kind of thing. Depended which route he wanted to go. I wasn't really totally sure. But it sounds like, interestingly, Brandon Ingram actually mentioned Jakob Pertl as a reason he wanted to play in Toronto, which is kind of fascinating. Because he was like, Pertl has really good hands. He's just like a really solid, and Pertl's a very good passer. Like he's not a Jokic level or Domantas Sabonis level
Did they play
passer.
together at some point?
No.
He just Ingram just
Well, and it's notorious that Ingram literally only ever eats, sleeps, and breathes basketball, and like not in an annoying Kobe kind of like Mamba mentality way, but Bi is just like that's just what he does. Like he just
Ingram's not
hoops.
selling like self-aggrandizing like self-help books and shit or nothing like that.
Yeah, like because I remember reading a profile on him when he was in New Orleans, like a couple years into his stay there. So when everyone was still kind of high on that situation, and the Pelicans like literally like locked him out of the gym and like tried to find ways to make him just go do other things because they're like, dude, like you're in New Orleans, man. Like there he was like the one player where you're actively trying to get him to buy into the nightlife of the city, not the other way around.
The opposite side.
Yeah, so it was like he's
They were trying
notorious.
to convince him to eat gumbo.
Yeah, they're like, please, like, do something, man. So,
Yeah.
like, go to the strip club. It'll be good for you, maybe. I don't know. It was just really funny. So, like, I do think that he does just legit no ball. Plus, he would have played against Pirtle when Pirtle was with the Spurs
Mm,
more because they would have been in the Western Conference and in the same division
I'm just thinking about how I wish I was in New Orleans right now. Not even for the Super Bowl, just to
in
be
general.
in New
Me too.
Orleans. It's such a
I've
fucking
never,
cool
I've
place.
never been. It's kind of like a dream city for me, but now I'm kind of bummed because I'm not planning a lot of U.S. travel for the time being. But yeah, I don't know. The Ingram thing, I'm kind of interested. But yeah, the fact he like listed Pirtle as a reason he wanted to come was really fascinating to me because I'm like, huh, didn't know. Yeah, I was not familiar with your free agent pickup game, Yak. But
Yeah.
all right. But I mean, Jakob is a solid player. Like he's a good passer. He keeps it moving. He sets good screens. He's efficient. Like he's a good teammate. He developed into something good. The Raptors, I didn't like the Pirtle trade at the time necessarily. I wish they had done it a lot sooner.
Mm.
But I think he is the right kind of big to have around a player like Scotty and quickly, right? But and now with Bi, we'll see. I think Bi makes his debut today actually for the Raptors
It'll be
potentially.
fine. I mean, I'm not gonna be paying attention because the Super Bowl's happening, but I'm sure
Same. Yeah. So.
Everyone will enjoy themselves. I hope he likes his new teammates. He said he liked Toronto a lot. I saw
A
a
lot of
video
players do, though.
resurfaced from
Tons of players do.
a bunch of years back, talking about his favorite cities. It's like LA, New York, Toronto.
Toronto actually has a very good, so it's interesting because we don't get a ton of free agents, but Toronto actually has a very good reputation among players. Tons of players spend their off season, come to Toronto in the off season because
There's a lot
Toronto in
to
the
do.
summer is like nice. Carabana is fun, like there's good shit. It's
I gotta
just it
say,
sucks in the winter. It's ass in the
as a
winter.
current Toronto resident, there's the summers are very nice. The
I will
winters
say though,
are the snow was up to my ankles yesterday, so
the
I
funny part,
less thing
well,
about
and
the winters the better.
the funny part about the winter there though is it's like it's not actually like that much worse than places like Minnesota. It's
Yeah,
just that like it's a different kind of shitty cold. The lakefront snow and the lake bullshit is awful. It's kind of like Cleveland, where
nice.
winters there are just ass, for because of the lakes. Shout out Lake Superior, and the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. It's a thing. Just a bit
Learned
I
about
gotta
that in my
continue.
making of modern Canada class. It was mentioned very briefly.
It's a bit that I have to continue with my friend. For the last 2 weeks, the only things I've sent, the only memes I will send him on Instagram are just Edmund Fitzgerald things.
Yeah.
Usually relating to the song, not even actually like the actual Edmund Fitzgerald, but like the song. Yeah. So anyway, peak Canadianism.
Before we wrap up NBA, I just want to briefly address the biggest trade of the trade
Mm.
deadline. Former dunk contest participant Jericho Sims has been traded to Milwaukee Bucks, where he will, I guess, be second string instead of third string. And we picked up DeLon Wright, who good, reliable wing, but who his
Solid.
shooting has kind of fallen off a cliff. Go
Was
Knicks
it ever
instead.
good? Was his shooting ever really good though?
He had like 2 seasons where it was like above average, but not too many. I don't think he's gonna play that much unless like Landry Shamet gets hurt.
Yeah. Do we want to
He's a player, a
do
veteran,
we
I guess.
do we want to go back to? Sorry, I'm just really fascinated by this wine. Mid wine, quick vibe check on the wine. How are we feeling?
I'm enjoying it. It's got like a nice dryness to it, but it's not like overwhelming.
The tannin, like the first sip I had, I was like, holy shit! But then it's kind of like the more I've consumed it, it's better.
Yeah, it's
Really
very
good,
nice.
like
It's opened
balance.
up a little bit.
They don't lie about the balance of like tannin and acidity because you can definitely like after your tongue is dry as hell, you can feel your cheeks watering. So
Yeah, yeah.
because that's
It's opened up a little bit since the bottle's gotten some air in it and stuff like that.
I'm not gonna
Um,
lie for the price, pretty good.
Much like the Kansas State men's basketball team has suddenly started developing into something functional over the last couple weeks. We just beat
Are you
KU. That's why I'm wearing the K State shirt. Fuck
are
KU, they suck.
you are you finding it like it's a little smoky? It's not super fruity by any means. It's definitely you can definitely taste a lot more of like the oak, like the secondary flavors from like oak than you can like
Yeah,
from the actual fruit
getting
itself.
woody vibes, a little bit
Yeah, it's like
earthy.
earthy, like smoky, a little bit smoky. Definitely, they say like smoke and spice and like chocolate, and I can get the chocolate and just like a dark chocolate, like bitterness, kind of like that kind of
Mm,
feeling. Not so much like. So when I've had some Merlots that aged when they're like fully aged and they reach kind of like their like rich texture, you got like really like nice chocolate. You do actually taste chocolate. This one tastes more like that like high cacao dark chocolate. That's like the 96% dark chocolate that you're like, ooh, I hate eating this, but it's good in the wine. Just it's very much from the oak, but I like it.
for those at home, the name of the winery, or no, maybe
Yeah,
name of the wine, not the name of the winery. Casillero
it's the
del
winery.
Diablo means Devil's Locker, by the
It
way,
is the
in
it
case
actually is
anyone
the
was
name of the it
curious.
is actually the name of the winery.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good stuff. I'm
it's
enjoying it.
from the Central Valley of Chile, which is close to like Santiago.
Good ass wine region, Chile, underrated wine country.
Yeah, they've got a couple. My favorite wine region that I've never really tried much of the wine, but the Casablanca Valley. Just love that
Mm.
because I love them. I don't know. I love Casablanca. The movie is just great. But of all the wine regions in all the world, yeah. Anyways, it's pretty good. I'm digging it. I see why it makes a great blend with Merlot and Cab. I can't say this is something I would definitely want to just like munch on a nice juicy steak with. This is big steak wine for sure.
Had some good steak the other day. I wish I had this in that
Yeah,
moment, but
yeah. This
still
is steak wine.
enjoyed it on its own. It's great.
So yeah, not bad.
Should we move on to the W?
Actually, quick, one last thing on the NBA. Any other the Mavericks got Caleb Martin. Any other Nico Harrison roasts you want to get in there first before we move
Yeah,
on?
you traded a young guard who defends really well, can shoot a three, quick release, can do a little bit of tertiary playmaking, I guess, and Quentin Grimes, and you trade him for Caleb Martin. Congratulations, Dallas Mavericks.
Baffling decisions continue. It's like
The guy who
when
could still
I
get better.
posting the Luca art or the Luca episode on our Instagram, which go follow us on Instagram. Plug, quick little plug. When I used the good place quote, like I took something great and ruined it a little bit just to enjoy it more. That's Nico Harrison with the Mavericks for sure. Yeah. Anyways, that's all I really. Yeah. Yeah. Anyways,
Hopefully not long term though.
back to the W, because more stuff has happened. Seems like free agency's kind of wrapping up now. We're getting a lot more like smaller players, things like that. People filling out the roster. A lot of the big movements kind of done. But yeah, Tina Charles went back to the Sun. So we have it's been interesting. We've got a lot of players returning to the teams that drafted them. So Natasha
Yeah.
Howard is back in Indiana.
Went back to the smoldering embers that were once the the Connecticut's.
And then, yeah, Tina Charles went back to whatever the Connecticut Sun are now. Marina Mabry has requested a trade. I can't remember if she did that in our last episode yet, so that's interesting.
He's also learning to dance, which is a lot of fun.
She's learning to cook too, which is the more important one. She's going through that discovery that most white people eventually do, where it's like, wow, spices. This is why we colonized the world. Damn.
Yeah, yeah,
This is why the British had an empire where the sun never set. Like this
yeah,
is
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
They're not just a
Anyway.
commodity; they're also enjoyable to consume. It turns out. Yeah,
Yeah,
who would have
yeah,
thought?
yeah.
Who
Who would
would
have
have thought?
thought? I mean, I definitely consider myself a spicy white because I've always liked spices, but that's not the point.
Exciting whites.
Exciting
They
whites.
have a podcast now. I think
These
Cooper.
bastards.
No.
Cooper
What's his
DeJean
name? Cooper
and yeah,
DeJean and somebody else.
they're
The other one.
stealing our thunder. I don't appreciate it. We should contact them and try and do a crossover episode. I have
Ooh,
green hair. They'll be into it. Go birds.
while we're before we get back to the W, quick women's
Yeah.
basketball breaking news. South Carolina lost their first game of the season.
Who
No
did they lose
longer
to?
undefeated. Texas beat them 66 to 62 in Austin, presumably.
Freaking what's his the coach Schaefer, Vic Schaefer.
Texas beat them without making a single three, which is fascinating. The Horns down though. I'm sorry. They're not in the Big 12 anymore, but I cannot support this activity.
I don't actually care to be
Also, I didn't
honest.
get in. I'm a little bitter about it.
Fair
Back in the
enough.
day, I would have got in this time, but last time,
That's how I feel about the University of Calgary. I'll never cheer for the Dinos. Fuck them.
Dino's such a fun name though.
You reject me twice, I'm never cheering for you. Also, it's an incredibly
I can't
pro-run
put
university.
UCLA. I got it. I didn't get in two times, but I can't handle UCLA basketball.
I literally didn't get in once, but they sent me 2 rejection letters. They emailed me a
Just wanted to
copy.
make sure you didn't show up.
They emailed me a copy. So not only is their deadline for graduate school like a month before everyone else's, which is super annoying, they sent me an email rejection and then mailed me one just for good measure, just to make sure that if I wanted to come back to Calgary, like you cannot come here. Anyways, screw the Dinos. Also, an impressively poorly run university. But anyway, not the point. Interesting. South Carolina, they lost, and then Tennessee beat UConn for the first time in like
A million years.
forever. And right after the Tennessee Summit bid got put in for the W. I love that. Also, there's maybe we can I don't know if we have time to talk about it today, but we should really address all of these expansion bids because there are many, and I have thoughts on a few
I'm
of them.
excited about the Philly bid. I'm
Do
excited
you want to
about
digress quickly and talk about a few?
very quickly. Yeah,
Yeah.
Philly's a really fascinating one. I wrote a piece a couple of years ago where I was
Mm-hmm.
trying to pick like what cities should the WNBA expand into. I wanted to do like four because there's still an even number at the time. I was like four cities. Philly was like one of the ones for me. Obviously Houston, I want the comments back. But
Yeah.
Philly, I was just like that city is too damn big and too important to hoops culture to not have had a WNBA team ever. I would love to see a team in Philly. I would love to.
I love the Tennessee bid. I like the ownership group. I think that's really fun. I think Nashville's a great place to do it because it's just a big enough market. Like Knoxville is just too
Yeah.
small to put a pro team. But if you put people in Nashville, then you can still do the Hall of Fame game. Like you can still play at Rocky Top and do your Hall of Fame game at Rocky Top, and that adds something to the W too, where it connects college to the W, which I think is really important, and also connects Pat Summitt's like legacy to the W because at the end of the day, like a ton of her former players are in the W, and she's a big reason why obviously not single-handedly, but I will give her more credit than Gina Oriama always. And she, like Candace Parker, obviously, like the pretty much one of the most important players ever in the W is one of Pat Summitt's former players, and players who played for Summit are like incredibly loyal to her and like how great of a coach in person she was. And I think it's like without a coach like Pat Summitt really growing women's college basketball, a league like the W could never have existed. So I think that just making that historical connection would be really fun. Plus, I kind of love the ownership bid. Like it's Candace Parker, Peyton Manning, Faith Hill, and Tim McGraw. Love that. The owners of the Predators. So you've got like real good money behind it, right? Like you've got
Mhm.
people who've got lots of capital. Because I mean, it's not like Candace is broke. She's got like big Adidas contracts. She's
Yeah.
stuff like that. So and Peyton
But
Manning, like
franchise owning money is like
yeah, exactly. It's different. So I love that that team would have resources. And they'd probably get to play at Bridgestone Arena in Nashville, like where the Predators play, so you'd have good facilities. The bid that I'm kind of also curious, the one I have the most thoughts on, interestingly, is actually Detroit. So Tom Gore's putting in a bid for to bring the Shock back. But the
Yeah.
funniest part about it is he's also the one who sold the Shock off and sent them to Tulsa. So it's like,
Oops.
brother, what are you? No. Like, I love the move because I want the Shock to come back, but you're never going to have the franchise. You can't connect the franchise history to the Shock
Hmm.
because they're in Dallas now.
Yeah, I would love to see a Detroit Toronto WNBA rivalry
It'd be
because
great.
of 4 or 5 hour
Proximity.
drive.
Well, I mean, like,
Yeah,
Pistons home games are already basically Raptors home games. So, like, and part of that's because the Pistons have just been terrible. But, like, proximity. Like, Raptors fans can afford to go to Detroit to a game
yeah.
easily. And
It's cheaper.
so it's
It's
way cheaper.
cheaper.
Yeah, way cheaper. And so I would love the Shock to come back. It's kind of like, I also understand, like, Tarika Foster Brasby. She's like from ESPN. She's a Detroit gal. She does Connecticut Sun broadcasts and stuff like that because she works for ESPN in Connecticut. But she's from Detroit, and she was kind of excited about it, but also simultaneously kind of pissed because it's like you had the opportunity a long time ago, like to keep the team. So that kind of sucks. Who else put a bid in? There was another one too. Oh, actually, well, Portland did just announce that the Thorns, because I think it was Portland Thorns ownership that
Yeah.
put in the bid for the team. They're building a joint facility with the Thorns. They're already planning a joint basketball and soccer like practice facility for the Thorns and whatever the WNBA team is. So it seems like the Portland team has more legs to it now than before.
Yeah. And Portland's been
Orlando.
good about supporting
It was
women's sports. They've
wasn't it
been really good
Orlando?
about it.
Didn't Orlando just put in a bid? Now I gotta fact check
It
myself.
may have been.
Nope, maybe not.
It's definitely somewhere in Florida, I thought. Yeah, they've expressed interest. I don't think they've submitted an official bid. At least not as far as I've seen on the internet.
Oh
Yeah, Nashville, Detroit, Houston, and Philly have officially submitted bids.
yeah. Oh, Houston. Houston did officially submit one, right? You just
Yeah.
said?
According to Front Office Sports, yeah.
Yeah, because Tillman Fertitta, I think, wants in
Bring
now.
Houston back. Bring Houston back,
Which
man.
I don't
Bring
hate
it
the
back.
idea. He seems like he's actually figured it out as an NBA owner. He got humbled pretty quickly and then took a step back, and now things are going better. So I feel like he'd be
Yeah.
fine. I did hear rumors about Cleveland also.
I feel like that's probably lower
Yeah.
on the Views priority list than some of those other cities, though, to be honest. No
Oh,
disrespect to
here's
Cleveland. I
actually
just don't
there's
think that that's as exciting to
so
the league as some of the others.
As of January 1st, these are the new bids. So Detroit, we talked about. Nashville, we talked about. Philadelphia, we talked about. Houston, you just mentioned. Tillman Fertitta. Cleveland put in a bid. Bucks ownership has expressed an interest in putting in a bid, but they didn't submit an official bid before the 16th. So, but they're interested. Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City has talked a lot about bringing a team there. Boss, and these ones. A couple of these are more speculation. So obviously Patrick Mahomes talking about Kansas City, and then Jason Tatum has talked about he's part of an ownership group in St. Louis that's trying to put something together. And then Kevin Durant is backing a group in Austin that's considering it. Those teams haven't submitted anything yet, those cities, but there's interest and NBA
Austin's just far
interest.
enough from Dallas for it to not overlap too much.
It'll be interesting though
3 hour drive.
if they brought back Houston and then they brought in Austin as well. Kind of like a fun little, kind of like what the NBA has with San Antonio, Dallas, and Houston.
Yeah.
Kind of fun.
Little Texas trio going to the league would be pretty cool.
It's a big enough state you could pretty easily do it though. And women's basketball is popular, obviously, with like big college programs like Texas and Texas A&M.
Yeah, Texas is the real deal now in women's college basketball. They weren't really like that
I
major the last
think
few years, but they're about there.
I think of these cities like the kind of speculation ones between say like Cleveland, Milwaukee, Kansas, St. Louis, and Austin. I feel like Cleveland and Milwaukee have the best chances because it would be NBA money, NBA ownerships, big enough cities. Cleveland has a history of having a team already. I don't think that St. Louis or Kansas City or Austin even really have. Well, Austin's different, but
Kansas City's been trying to get a basketball team forever. Like in the late 2000s, early 2010s, like the Sprint Center got this big update. They were trying to bring an NBA team to the Sprint Center, or
and
they're trying to bring an NHL team to the Sprint Center. Never happened. They just host the Big 12 tournament now, and that's
they've
about it
become a
sports
pretty big
wise.
women's like sports city
Yeah.
because of the Kansas City Current. Because like
Yep.
Patrick Mahomes' wife is
Yeah.
involved with that team,
They're well
and
attended too, their games.
yeah, so like it's a big sports city. So I feel like they would have it, especially if someone like Mahomes was part of that ownership situation. But I don't think it's a market necessarily the W wants to go to right away. But I also do wonder how much they want to go to like super big markets all the time because you lose out a little bit on like I don't know. It's nice when you're kind of like the only game in town, a little bit.
Yeah, the Kansas City thing is cool because like you can capture fans from two states because Kansas City, basically Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas, around both sides of the state line. But
And
yeah,
obviously, too, like there's a good history of women's basketball in Kansas in particular, too, and even Missouri, right? So you have that. But anyways, we should wrap up soon. So back to WNBA free agency. I got a Super Bowl party to go to.
yeah, me too.
Anyways,
Gabby Williams back in Seattle.
yeah, the Chicago Sky have traded Dana Evans, so that situation's finally resolved. She is now a member of the Las Vegas Aces, which I do not dislike. Their bench is kind of a disaster, so she'll be a great secondary point guard. Quickly on the Aces, I think they've completely botched a couple of. As much as they've done great getting Jewel Lloyd, I feel like they also kind of botched a few things. So Tiffany Hayes signed in Golden State, so she's reunited with Kate Martin. And the ironic part about it is that the Aces protected Tiffany Hayes in the expansion draft, lost Kate Martin to the Valkyries, and then ended up not re-signing Tiffany Hayes, even though they wasted a protection spot on her. And personally, I just think that's a questionable move because it's like you used a protection spot on a player who came out of retirement to come play for you and then lost the diamond in the rough young player that you picked up. Kate Martin was like a kind of, they just took a chance drafting her, and then she turned into something really positive for them, and she was really one of their only productive bench players.
The team loved her
So,
too.
and then they also lost Sydney Colson. Like, they lost, important culture pieces. So I'm a little bit unsure how I feel about the Aces in terms of just their moves on the fringe, where it's one of those things where they have really high top end talent, so you kind of let it slide a little because they're going to win a lot of games. As long as you have Asia Wilson and Chelsea Gray and Jackie Young, you're going to win a ton of games. But I also think I have some questions about on court fit with Jewel Lloyd and Chelsea Gray. I think it'll be fine, but interesting. And it's definitely different because you've lost a really elite 3-point shooter in Kelsey Plum for a good shooter, but less good shooter in Jewel Lloyd. A little more ISO heavy, a little more mid range heavy, kind of like Chelsea Gray. They overlap a little more in my mind. But I think Jewel Lloyd could maybe take some ball handling responsibilities off of Chelsea Gray that Kelsey maybe wasn't ready for. I don't know. Anyway, I just think the handling of the Kate Martin situation is kind of shitty, which is ironic to be talking about a deep second round player like that, but she turned into something really good, and the Aces haven't exactly had great draft success in the last few years because Kristen Bell is there. They haven't really done well in the draft outside of when they got to draft high and get players like Asia and Kelsey and Jackie. So it's a little concerning to me that they used. I just think they kind of messed up that situation, so we'll see. But I mean, championships cover up everything, so whatever. But
Yeah,
I do
wrong.
think,
It's a really effective
yeah,
band-aid.
it's like Brian Windhorst always said, if you win the championship, you don't have to apologize for anything that you did to get there. And it's kind of true because it's you won, right? You achieved the goal. But I also just don't know that getting rid of a player like Kate Martin was actually useful. But whatever. There was something else that was big. Yeah, I do think Daya will be good. The Valkyries have filled out a roster a little bit more, but I don't know who most of these people are still. But they picked up Monique Billion. They picked Billings. They picked up Veronica Burton on a training camp contract. They picked up Julie Van Loo on a training camp contract. I
Get
wonder
ready
if
for 6 wins.
I kind of want to know if Chloe Bibby is related to Mike Bibby. They
Is
signed
it the same
Tiffany.
spelling?
Yep. They signed Alyssa Cunane on a training camp contract, which is interesting. Letitia Emmy here. They signed her on a training camp contract. Or no, actually, sorry, they picked her up on waivers from
No, she's
the
Australian.
Dream. Okay.
Chloe, baby. Yeah.
Damn.
Also white.
Uh, damn. They picked up. Yeah, I think Letitia Emmy here. It's a good flyer. They're taking a lot of flyers on people. I do think a player like Julie Van Loo and whatever can be solid just to help you out. The Sun are doing Sun things. The Fever are the other team I sort of want to talk about because they've done a lot of changing of things this year. So we already talked about how they picked up DeWanna Bonner. Yeah, we did talk about that, right? Yeah, they picked up
Reunited
DeWanna.
with her old coach. Unfortunately, not
Yeah,
going back to Phoenix makes me a little sad, but she'll get
I
some.
do
I
think.
think she'll work well with Caitlin Clark. I think they'll be a good
Yeah,
combination together.
I think DeWanna's gonna cook there. I like this. The Fever targeted Sydney Colson. They really wanted Colson. Caitlin Clark actually apparently wanted Colson. So I suspect she values. There's just a culture element that I suspect she really values there. They picked up Natasha Howard and they picked up. There was someone else. I don't know. They got rid of Grace Berger, which pissed off a lot of fans. But she went to Minnesota, so that would be interesting. I think she could help the Lynx. She's a really just decent young point guard. She's got obviously lots of room to grow, but she showed lots of promise. And a coach like Cheryl Reeve will know what to do with her. I'm a little curious what's happening with Aaliyah Boston because you brought in Natasha Howard and DeWanna. Not that DeWanna's a 5, but I mean, the front court has changed pretty significantly in Indiana, and I'm really curious to see how that works with Aaliyah Boston. But yeah.
I think they can squeeze them all into that rotation.
I mean,
I think
Natasha Howard
they'll
does
find a way
have
to
some
figure it out.
range. Howard has some range. She's also getting older, and same with Dewana, so it's not like you want them playing 40 minutes. You don't want them playing a ton, so you can maybe platoon them a little, because Natasha Howard's more of a 4 than a 5, I guess. So, could work. I suppose you could play Dewana as a 3. Just kind of big for that, but you
Yeah,
could.
that's kind of what I figured they would wind up doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other final W thoughts for you?
Shit. Hope we get a couple more guards over in Phoenix. I'm excited for. It's interesting. The Fever, I think, are going to take a step forward and being like a real competitive team. They look like they got a
Mm-hmm.
little something going on there. Minnesota was quiet, but I think they got a lot going on already. They
They
don't
didn't need
necessarily
to be
need
though.
to shake things up.
They re-signed Heidemann, which was their main priority, but everyone else is locked up
Yeah,
on contracts. So like
yeah. No
they
need for a
got rid
major
of
shake up there.
Nikolina Micic, or Milicic, sorry, but they or Milic, but they picked up a French center. Emily Engsler and Shug Sutton both signed Mystics training camp contracts, which I kind of like. Diamond DeShields, yeah, she went to Connecticut. Yeah. Kayla Charles signing in Dallas. A lot of these are training camp contracts, so we'll see if they actually pan out into anything anyway. It looks like the Sun have taken, or sorry, the Phoenix, the Mercury have taken some flyers on a few different guards. Especially like Sammy Whitcomb will be solid on the. She's a good shooter. She's older now, but solid shooter. I don't know. Some interesting moves. It's kind of wrapping up now, so I feel like maybe by the time we record next, we can actually maybe start to talk about actual basketball fits and kind of things like that. But free agency, WNBA free agency, the off season's kind of slowed down a little bit, which has been nice. How do you feel about Unrivaled acting as basically like a tampering situation for every team?
It's kind of being like the like Team USA had always been for the men's game. Like this is where
Yeah.
everyone gets to like mingle and talk about like it's in the summer, so or I guess in the off season, the summer being the
Mm-hmm.
winter for the WNBA. It's in the off season they get to kind of like, oh shit, I've never played with this player before, huh? What's this like? Or I've never really interacted with this player before, and everyone's kind of all in the same space, except this time it's way more players because it's not just one team. So it really kind of is like the little the I can't say the tampering hub, but you know what I mean. Like
Kind
it's
of is
the
though.
networking function for the WNBA.
I'm
It's like
not
a
gonna lie
conference.
though, it's been fascinating because at first, like when we talked about how like I wonder how long the W is gonna let this go because they're letting like this league come in and like overtake them in terms of treating players better. But at the same time, like it's actually working better for the W in some ways because people are talking about their stars.
During the
Like
off season.
we're talking more about the player movement in the WNBA in the off season than we are actually talking about Unrivaled.
Right.
I mean, you and I aren't particularly interested in 3-on-3, so that's part of like us specifically as a podcast. But generally speaking, the coverage hasn't really been about the games in Unrivaled. It's about all of the stuff around it, like the players interacting with each other and like the tampering aspect and like the player movement in the WNBA. So if anything, it's almost focused more attention on the WNBA, which has been kind of funny. It's like having a the opposite effect of what they actually like tried to do. I feel like Unrivaled has it'll succeed, but I just think there's limits to how far the 3-on-3 game can go.
Yeah, 3-on-3 full court is also a little weird to me.
I like it better though. I don't really like half court 3-on-3 as much.
Like that, like people having to like get the ball through him and just bring it back to the 3 point line and then go back to the same
Yeah,
basket. It
no
is a little
flow.
goofy conceptually, but that's how
That's how
most
you
people
play
grew
though.
up playing 3-on-3. Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So like it's more natural to watch in that sense, but it's kind of like
yeah,
less fun.
yeah.
I think that Unrivaled as it evolves will be better, but it's been kind of interesting how in the end we're still mostly just talking about the WNBA and it's probably given the WNBA more eyes because we're talking about all the off-season movement.
Yep.
I mean, to be
In
fair,
the end, they win. They
this
win.
has been like an unprecedented off season too, though. And the fascinating part is most of them are 1 year contracts. A lot of them are short contracts, so we're going to see it all again next year when there's more money and another team in the league. I think Toronto has a chance to really capitalize next year.
I hope so. I hope so. I hope their expansion draft goes a little bit.
Different.
I hope it's a little more ready to compete out the gate than Golden
Yeah.
State's.
Golden State's is very fascinating. I hope that the Raptors mostly. Sorry, the Raptors. Oh my god. I hope the tempo. Like subconsciously blocked that name out of my head. I hope the tempo target like young players who have high ceiling. Like, I don't, like I hope that they go for like the Kate Martins, like those kinds of players, and like a few useful
Right.
veterans, rather than what the Valkyries did by prioritizing players who largely are going to stay in Europe
Yeah.
or are injured all the time. I do hope that the tempo kind of take advantage of that. And I know for a fact that Kia Nurse will be a Toronto tempo. It's just whether or not she leaves in free agency or they pick her in the expansion draft because she only signed a 1-year contract in Chicago. So I suspect she's just going to go home and they'll just sign her in free agency.
Yeah.
Which would be good. I don't. Kia's the right kind of veteran to like. She's not a player you build around, but she's like a good. She'll be a great face of the franchise for like a new Canadian franchise. I could see if the Washington Mystics don't protect Aaliyah Edwards, then she'll be a Toronto tempo.
That would be interesting. I'd be surprised if they let her go,
Say,
but
right,
I wouldn't be
they
surprised if she
used
wanted
way,
to come out here.
they, you wouldn't be surprised?
I wouldn't be surprised if she wanted to come out here,
Yeah,
but I'd
yeah,
be
okay,
surprised if
yeah.
they didn't protect her.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I thought you said, but then my brain just said, what? Yeah, they used too high of a pick to let her go, but I would be shocked. But she would be fun. If Letitia Amy here doesn't work out in Golden State, I could see that. She's another Canadian player who could come home. Minnesota will not be parting ways with Bridget Carleton, so that's not going to
no,
happen.
not unless she
She
forces her way out somehow.
she is like turning into a very good player. Like she has used her time overseas to become very, very way better than I honestly thought she was going to
Shoot the
be.
cover off that fucking ball.
Yeah. And her first couple years, I'm like, oh yeah, she's like useful, but I didn't really think she was like a great. She wasn't like a great shooter. But
Mhm.
damn, she has worked with some good shooting coaches in Europe because she has turned into a very good player, which is fun. I
Sniper,
love. I really like.
sniper.
I really like Bridget, so I'm very happy for her. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. There's lots of Canadian talent coming up in the drafts also, because like Silas Swords in Michigan and Toby Fournier at Duke are both
Yep,
like kind of that next tier of young Canadian talent coming through. And there's others too, but those two in particular. So by the time they're ready for the draft, I'm curious to see if Toronto's in a position to get them. So yeah, I don't know. Lots of fun shit to come though. But this offseason has been wild and hard to keep track of,
for
objectively.
sure. A lot of moving in both leagues.
Yeah. And I guess it'll be what's going to be interesting to see is how much we continue to talk about this now that the movement's done, right? Like obviously, and by
Mhm.
we I mean like the broader public. I don't mean you and I specifically because you and I talk about the most deep cut shit when it comes to basketball as it is. So we will keep talking. But I'm curious just as a whole what the conversation remains or if we all come back in like April because we're like, right, the W is starting soon and there's everyone change teams.
Right.
So season previews are going to be real fun. So yeah.
There's gonna be a lot of having to go back on Basketball Reference to figure out who's on whose team when the season
Yeah.
previews come around.
Oh my god, and training camp when like there's a bunch of players and then they all get cut, it's like the worst. And trying to figure out who's still there. Oh my god. It's going to be so good. All right. Well, any final thoughts before we wrap up and then go? Who are you cheering for the Super Bowl, actually? Do you have a rooting
I
interest?
do not want the people of Kansas City to be happy. No, I'm rooting against the Chiefs. I go
Same.
Eagles. I
Yeah. I have to admit, I was like unhappy about this particular Super Bowl matchup because I was like, again, like, I'm
hmm
done. But my dream Super Bowl was Bills Lions, but that was not to be.
yeah. I want to see Saquon do some
Shit.
vintage Barry Bonds shit.
I would like him to
Or
reverse
Barry
hurdle
Bonds, Barry
somebody
sick.
again. Oh shit, that's okay. I couldn't think of Barry. I was trying to think of Barry Sanders' name yesterday randomly as well,
Yeah.
and couldn't for some reason. I would like to see Saquon reverse hurdle somebody again. That would be ideal.
Oof.
I want to see some big AJ Brown. I want to see AJ Brown cook. I love AJ. He's
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
I just want to. I don't know. I'm also rooting against the Chiefs. As much as a three-peat would be kind of interesting, I'm over them. This particular year has been tough watching Patrick Mahomes because I appreciate his talent, but he's no longer fun to watch because he's not exactly like doing magical shit. He's just flopping and getting calls.
You hate to see it, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Go Philly. Hope they
Go Birds.
shout out to various Philadelphia legends. Go shout out to
Don Staley.
Freeway.
I'm rooting for the Birds because of Don Staley. Let's be real.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair.
I
That's
want
fair. She
Don
needs to
Staley
win
to have.
today.
I
She
want
needs
Don
to win
Staley to
today
have
after what
right.
after Texas beating South Carolina. Yeah,
I want Don Staley to have nice things. So therefore, go
yeah.
Birds.
There we go.
All right. Well, yeah. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. 5 stars, 5 stars, all the stars. As many stars as is available to give us, we would appreciate that very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, we post as far as the actual wine part of the Wine and Dime podcast. We post wine recommendations every Wednesday. Every weekend, we'll be posting kind of recommendations for games and wine pairings. Not that those are the most important games all the time. It's just sometimes there's a wine pairing that works super well with a certain game, so we'll recommend those. But yeah, follow us on the socials and continue to listen to the podcast. And
Yeah.
with that,
Until next time.
we're back to being an every other week podcast unless some earth shattering thing happens again. But I
Yeah.
think we're safe now.
Unless Jericho Sims goes and wins MVP for the Milwaukee Bucks, I think we're probably going to go back to the regular
We're
schedule.
we're probably safe as far as emergency podcasts go now.
Yeah.
We'll see. All right, later.